there lived a husband and wife. For a long time they already wanted to have a child, but he was not there.
Oh.
One day, my wife fell ill. The husband asked her what she wants the most. The wife replied that there was a magnificent garden nearby, where many of the most beautiful flowers grow. There is a beautiful Rapunzel in the garden. It looked so fresh and so green that she really wanted to taste it. But the garden was surrounded by a high fence, and no one dared to enter it, since this garden belonged to one witch. She possessed great power, and everyone in the world feared her. The husband loved his wife very much, and decided to get a Rapunzel for her, no matter what it cost him. And so at dusk he climbed over the stone fence into the sorceress's garden, in a hurry picked up a whole handful of green Rapunzel, and brought it to his wife. She immediately made herself a salad from it, and ate greedily. She liked this salad so much that the next day she wanted even more than before. The husband made his way into the garden again, but the witch was already standing in front of him. She glared at him angrily and said that he would pay a lot for stealing the Rapunzel. He asked the witch not to be angry, because he tore off the Rapunzel for his wife, who was very ill. And he loves her so much.
Okay.
The witch's anger passed a little, and she said that if it was true, she would allow him to collect as much Rapunzel as he wanted, but on one condition. He will have to give the witch the child who will be born to his wife. The husband agreed with fear. When the wife gave birth to a daughter, the witch immediately appeared, took the child with her, and named her Rapunzel. Rapunzel became the most beautiful girl in the world. When she was 12 years old, the witch locked her in a tower. That tower was in the forest, and it had no doors or stairs. Only at the very top was a small window. When the witch wanted to climb the tower, she called Rapunzel to pull her sides down. And Rapunzel had long, beautiful hair. She hears the voice of the witch, loosens her braids, ties them up to the window hook, and the hair falls down, and the witch then climbs up, clinging to them.
Hello.
Several years passed, and the king's son happened to ride a horse through the forest where the tower stood. Suddenly he heard singing, and it was so pleasant that he stopped and began to listen. Rapunzel sang it in her wonderful voice. The prince wanted to climb up. He began to look for the entrance to the tower, but it was impossible to find him. He once saw how the witch climbs up the braids that Rapunzel lowered her. And the next day, when it was already getting dark, the prince drove up to the tower and called Rapunzel. She heard, pulled her braids down, and the prince climbed up. Rapunzel, seeing that a man she had never seen came to her, was very frightened at first. But the prince spoke to her affectionately and said that his heart was so touched by the singing that he decided to see her without fail. Then Rapunzel ceased to be afraid, and when he asked if she agreed to marry him, she gave her consent and held out her hand to him. But they just did not know how to go down together. They figured out that when the prince came, he would always take a piece of silk with him, and Rapunzel would weave a ladder out of it. And when the ladder is ready, they will go down it together and leave. The sorceress did not notice anything until one day Rapunzel asked why it is easier to drag the prince up. The sorceress understood everything, got angry and clutched in rage at Rapunzel's beautiful hair. I wrapped them around my left arm several times, and with my right grabbed the scissors and cut them off. She took the sorceress into the dense thicket of Rapunzel and hid her there. She tied the severed braids to the window hook, and when the prince appeared, she pulled them down. The prince climbed up and saw the witch. She looked at him with her malicious look and said that he would never see Rapunzel. The king's son was beside himself with grief and jumped out of the tower in despair, but the thorny thorns of the bushes, on which he fell, gouged out his eyes. The blind prince wandered for several years in grief and sorrow through the forest, all the time grieving and crying for his beloved lost. Once he went into a dense thicket. Suddenly the prince heard someone singing. It seemed so familiar to him, and he went to meet him. When he came closer, Rapunzel recognized him, threw herself on his neck and cried bitterly with joy. 2 tears fell in his eyes, and the prince regained his sight and began to see as before. He brought her to his kingdom, and they lived for many, many years in happiness and joy.
One day, all the animals on the farm were left without food. Then one little red hen decided to go to the field and look for something to eat. It was sad to walk alone, so the hen went to the cow and invited her to walk together. But the cow did not want to go anywhere, and therefore said that she was very hot and she would stay on the farm. Then the chicken went to the pig, but she did not want to leave her cool puddle. So, the chicken decided to ask the dog for help, but he wished to stay in his booth. Finally, the chicken went to the duck. After a short thought, she also refused to leave the pond. Nobody wanted to go with the chicken, so she had to look for food alone. So, a chicken walked across the field and found several grains of wheat. Joyful, she returned to the farm and decided to plant the seed she found. The chicken thought that friends could help her. She showed the grains to the cow and offered to plant them together. But the cow was still very hot. Then the hen approached the pig, but she refused to help. So, the chicken turned to the dog, but he did not want to leave the booth. The last hen asked for help from the duck, but she decided to stay in her favorite pond. And the chicken had to plant the seeds alone. Weeks passed, the rains began, and the seeds sprouted. It would be worth weeding them. Then the chicken asked her friends who could help her. The cow said it was raining today. The pig did not want to move. The dog was afraid to get dirty, and the duck complained about its health. And again the chicken had to do everything herself. The little red hen weeded the bed alone. After a while, the wheat grew and it was time to harvest. Then the chicken invited her friends to collect wheat together. But the cow was very busy. The pig did not want to get out of its puddle. The dog hid in his booth, and the duck did not listen to the chicken at all. So the little red hen worked until nightfall. She was harvesting wheat ear by ear. Finally, it was time to turn the grains into flour. The chicken again went to ask for help from her friends. Then the cow said that it was time for her to give milk, and refused to leave the barn. The pig didn't want to help either. The dog said that he did not know how to make flour, and the duck was very busy swimming in the pond. The little chicken chopped the wheat herself and turned it into flour. Finally, it's time to bake delicious bread. The chicken turned to her friends for help. But the cow had no time for work. The pig is too tired to help. The dog was busy, and the duck said that she did not know how to bake bread at all. This time, the chicken got really angry. She went to the kitchen, and she kneaded the dough from the flour that she ground. She put it in the mold herself, sent it to the oven and waited for the bread to be baked. When the aroma of fresh baked goods spread around, the chicken took the bread out of the oven. She went out into the garden, sat down at the table, and called her friends. Seeing fresh bread, all the inhabitants of the farm crowded around the chicken. They all wanted to eat well. But the chicken said that she would not share with her friends. After all, she made the bread herself, and therefore only she deserved to eat. And with great appetite, the chicken began to peck at the bread. But she couldn't come to terms with the fact that her friends were hungry. Then the chicken decided to share food, but only if her friends promised to continue to help her in everything. Now all the animals were ashamed of their behavior, because they realized that the chicken was right. And they promised to always help each other in everything. The little red hen knew that her friends were learning a real lesson. She shared bread with them. The friends ate together, became well-fed and contented. They lived on their farm for a long time and always helped each other.